Hi, I'm Jessica. 3 weeks ago, I walked into my sister's wedding reception with a congratulations card and forced enthusiasm, and walked out with a broken nose, my dress torn, and my soul shattered in front of 120 guests. My father punched me. My mother cheered. My sister laughed and said, "Finally, someone put you in your place." And not a single person in that country club ballroom lifted a finger to help me. But that wasn't even the beginning. That was just the moment when years of manipulation, theft, and systematic destruction finally erupted in public. So what do you think happened when I made 5 phone calls that night that would bring their entire world crashing down like a house of cards? Before we get into it, let me know, what's your biggest family drama? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I promise this story will make you feel less alone. I should have known better than to come. That thought kept circling through my mind like a broken record as I stood near the ornate floor-to-ceiling windows of the Riverside Country Club, clutching my small black purse like it could somehow shield me from what I knew was coming. The room was all gleaming marble columns and elaborate crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than I made in a year, the kind of place that screamed old money and exclusivity. The kind of place my family loved to show off in, and the kind of place I had never quite belonged to, no matter how hard I tried. 120 guests dressed in designer gowns and perfectly tailored suits, all here for my younger sister Madison's big day. Madison, the golden child, the perfect daughter who could do absolutely no wrong in our parents' eyes, the one who got the college fund, the family connections, the opportunities, the love. And then there was me, Jessica, age 28, the family disappointment, the black sheep, the one they only invited out of obligation and to make themselves look generous and inclusive to their society friends. I told myself I came because it was the right thing to do. Because you show up for family, even when they've spent 28 years treating you like you don't exist, except when they need someone to blame for everything that goes wrong. That's what I kept repeating to myself, like a mantra as I hovered near the back of the ballroom, watching my mother Patricia glide between tables like she was hosting the Met Gala. Her $20,000 diamond necklace caught the light almost as much as her practiced politician's wife smile did. My father Robert was holding court near the mahogany bar with several of Madison's new in-laws, all wealthy businessmen who hung on his every word like he was dispensing wisdom from Mount Olympus. He was in his element. The successful construction company owner, the pillar of the community, the man everyone respected. And there she was, Madison, absolutely radiant in her $15,000 Vera Wang dress, accepting congratulations like she was royalty granting audiences to her adoring subjects. "Jessica, dear," said Mrs. Whitmore, one of my mother's bridge club friends, her tone dripping with that special kind of fake politeness that wealthy women had perfected. "How nice that you made it. I wasn't sure you'd be able to get away from whatever it is you do these days." Art therapy with underprivileged kids at the community center, I wanted to say, helping children who've been through trauma process their emotions through creative expression. But instead, I just forced a smile and nodded. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth. I'd almost not come at least 15 times in the past week. I'd stood in front of my closet for 2 hours that morning, trying to find something appropriate to wear that wouldn't give my mother another reason to criticize me in front of her friends. My mother spotted me then, her smile tightening just enough to send a clear message of disapproval. She click-clacked across the marble floor in her red-soled Louboutins, each step sounding like a tiny hammer of judgment against the polished stone. "You could have at least tried to look presentable," she hissed under her breath, just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "This isn't one of your little charity events, Jessica. This is Madison's wedding." I glanced down at my simple navy dress, the nicest thing I owned that wasn't torn or stained from working with kids all day. I'd actually saved up for 3 months to buy it, specifically for this wedding. "I thought I looked fine, Mom." "Fine isn't good enough for Madison's day," she snapped, then immediately turned to beam brilliantly at a passing couple. "The Hendersons! How absolutely wonderful to see you! Doesn't Madison look simply divine?" Before I could escape to the bathroom or fake an important phone call, Madison herself appeared beside us, still glowing from her ceremony. She looked like something out of a fairy tale, all flowing silk and perfectly arranged curls. But when she looked at me, something cold and calculating flickered in her blue eyes, the same look she'd given me since we were children whenever she was about to say something cruel. "Jess," she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "I'm so glad you could make it. I know it must be hard watching someone else succeed when you're still, well, figuring things out at your age." The words hit like physical blows. 28 years old and still figuring it out. As if my work helping traumatized children wasn't real success. As if my small apartment and modest lifestyle meant I was a failure as a human being. Something inside me snapped after years of bending. After 28 years of being their emotional punching bag, their scapegoat, their designated family failure, I couldn't take another second of it. At least I'm not marrying someone whose family had to buy their way into Stanford, I said quietly, but clearly enough for the nearby tables to hear, or whose pharmaceutical company is under investigation for price gouging. The smile froze on Madison's face like ice forming on a window. A few guests turned to look with interest. The air in the room seemed to thicken with tension. What did you just say? My father's voice boomed from behind me like thunder. I turned to see him striding over, his face already flushed red with anger and champagne. His jaw was set in that dangerous way I remembered from childhood, when he was about to lose control. Nothing, Dad. Just congratulating the happy couple on their beautiful ceremony. Don't you dare lie to me, he snarled, grabbing my arm hard enough to leave bruises that would last for weeks. You've been nothing but an embarrassment your entire pathetic life, and now you want to ruin Madison's perfect wedding day? I didn't ruin anything, I protested, but my voice was shaking with 28 years of suppressed fear. I was just... His fist connected with my face before I could finish the sentence. The crack of knuckles against cheekbone echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. Conversations died mid-sentence. My world exploded into brilliant white stars and searing pain that radiated through my entire skull. I stumbled backward, my hand flying instinctively to my nose as blood began to flow freely down my face. Through the ringing in my ears and the tears blurring my vision, I heard Madison's delighted laughter, high and sharp like breaking crystal. Finally, she exclaimed, actually clapping her hands together like she was at a particularly entertaining show. Someone finally put Jessica in her place. My Aunt Margaret, my father's sister and longtime enabler, actually cheered from her table near the dance floor. About time. That girl has needed a reality check for years, always thinking she's better than everyone else. I looked around the room desperately, blood dripping steadily onto my navy dress, waiting for someone, anyone, to help me. To say this was wrong, to call security, to intervene, to do something, anything. But they just stared. Some looked genuinely shocked, others seemed entertained by the drama. A few were already pulling out their phones, but not to call for help, to record the spectacle for their social media. I was bleeding and humiliated, and I was their entertainment. Get out, my father said, his voice low and dangerous, the same tone he'd used when I was a child and had displeased him. Get out of here before I do something worse. You're an embarrassment to this family. I stumbled toward the exit on shaking legs, my nose throbbing with every heartbeat, my vision blurry with tears and pain. Behind me I heard my mother's voice, bright and cheerful as if nothing had happened. Well, that's taken care of. Now who wants more champagne? Let's not let anything spoil Madison's special day. The laughter and resumed conversations that followed me out felt like knives being driven into my back, one by one. I made it to my car somehow, though I don't remember walking through the parking lot or past the valet station. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. When I finally managed to look in the rearview mirror, a stranger stared back at me. Nose obviously broken and already swelling. Blood covering the entire front of my dress, mascara streaked down my cheeks in black rivers. I sat there in the parking lot for what felt like hours, just breathing and trying to process what had happened. My own father had punched me in front of 120 people, and not one of them had helped me. My sister had laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. My aunt had cheered. My mother had acted like it was just a minor inconvenience to be swept away. This wasn't just another bad family moment. This wasn't something I could pretend didn't happen or make excuses for. This was war, and they had just fired the first shot in front of witnesses. I reached for my phone with trembling, blood-stained fingers and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Dr. Sarah Chen, my old college roommate who was now a prominent civil rights attorney in downtown Chicago, the kind of lawyer who took on cases that made headlines and destroyed powerful people who thought they were untouchable. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. Jess? It's almost midnight. Is everything okay? Sarah, my voice cracked, but I forced myself to continue. I need help. I need a lawyer. I need someone who can destroy people. Talk to me. What happened? I told her everything, starting with that night, but going back years. Not just what happened at the wedding, but the lifetime of abuse, manipulation, and systematic exclusion. How they'd convinced everyone I was the problem child, while hiding their own crimes. How they'd stolen from me, sabotaged my opportunities, lied about me to other family members, and finally physically assaulted me in public, while an entire room full of people watched and did nothing. Sarah didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear her typing on her computer. Jess, she said finally, her voice steady and professional, but with an undertone of rage. I need you to come to Chicago first thing tomorrow morning. We're going to destroy them so completely they'll wish they'd never heard your name. Something in her tone made me believe her completely. After we hung up, I wasn't done. I scrolled to another number. Marcus Rivera, a private investigator I'd met through my work with at-risk youth. He'd helped several families deal with abuse situations and had a reputation for uncovering secrets that powerful people wanted to keep buried. I left a detailed voicemail. Marcus, it's Jessica Warren. I need your help urgently. My family just assaulted me in public at my sister's wedding, and I think there's a lot more they're hiding. I'm going to war, and I need ammunition. Please call me as soon as you get this. My phone buzzed within minutes. A text from an unknown number. Saw what happened tonight. Have information you need about your family. Information that will change everything. Meet me tomorrow. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pounding. Someone had been watching. Someone knew something. Someone else had been waiting for this moment. I drove home slowly through the empty streets, my nose still bleeding intermittently, my mind racing with possibilities and plans. In my small one-bedroom apartment, the one my parents constantly mocked as beneath their standards, and what happens when you don't apply yourself, I carefully cleaned the blood from my face and took dozens of photos of my injuries from every angle. Evidence. I was going to need all the evidence I could get. As I sat on my bed at 2 a.m, holding an ice pack to my swollen nose and staring at the photos on my phone, I whispered to myself, they have no idea what they've just started. They wanted me gone? I'm about to make them wish I'd never existed. The next morning, I woke up looking like I'd been hit by a freight train. My nose was swollen to twice its normal size and had turned a spectacular shade of purple. Both eyes had developed impressive bruises that made me look like a raccoon. Every breath hurt. Every movement of my facial muscles sent sharp pains through my skull. But for the first time in years, my mind was crystal clear and focused. I called in sick to work, which wasn't technically a lie, since I could barely speak through my swollen face, and caught the first train to Chicago. Sarah had texted me her office address along with a simple message. Bring everything. Medical records, financial documents, anything you have. We're going to war, and we need ammunition. The 3-hour train ride gave me time to think, to plan, to remember things I'd tried to forget. I thought about all the times over the years they told me I was worthless, all the opportunities they deliberately sabotaged, all the ways they'd systematically isolated me from other family members by spreading lies about my character and mental stability. I remembered being 12 years old and having my father tell everyone at Thanksgiving dinner that I was slow and not college material, while Madison sat there smirking. I remembered being 16 and finding out that my college fund had mysteriously been redirected to pay for Madison's car and private tutoring. I remembered job interviews that fell through after my parents spoke to their contacts about my instability and unreliability. The train pulled into Union Station, right on schedule. Sarah's law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper, the kind of building that screamed success and power. When I walked into her corner office, face still bruised and swollen, wearing yesterday's blood-stained dress under a jacket because it was the only evidence I had, she took one look at me and immediately stood up from behind her massive mahogany desk. Jesus Christ, Jess, she breathed, coming around to hug me carefully, mindful of my injuries. I knew it was bad from our phone call, but seeing it in person, it's worse than what you can see, I said quietly, my voice still thick from the swelling. This goes back decades, Sarah. This was just the first time they did it in public. She gestured for me to sit in one of the plush leather chairs facing her desk. The office was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, diplomas and awards covering one wall, shelves lined with legal precedents and case law. This was where powerful people came when they needed problems solved permanently. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a legal pad and settling back in her chair. Start from the very beginning, and don't leave out a single detail. So, I did. But this time, I didn't just tell her about the wedding. I told her about being 8 years old and getting locked in the basement for 6 hours for talking back to my mother. About my college fund mysteriously disappearing when Madison needed a new BMW for her 16th birthday. About job interviews that fell through after my parents spoke to their contacts about my supposed mental health issues. About the inheritance from my grandmother that somehow got redirected to family expenses, specifically renovating the house and buying my father a new boat. I told her about the gaslighting, the systematic destruction of my self-esteem, the way they'd isolated me from extended family by telling everyone I was unstable and couldn't be trusted. How they'd sabotaged every relationship I'd ever had by calling my boyfriends and telling them I was troubled and came from a difficult background. Sarah took detailed notes, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When I mentioned the financial theft, she stopped writing and looked up sharply. This isn't just assault and emotional abuse, she said when I finished 45 minutes later. This is a systematic pattern of financial abuse, fraud, defamation, and deliberate destruction of your opportunities spanning decades. How much money are we talking about here? I pulled out the manila folder I'd managed to piece together over the years. Bank statements I'd copied, emails I'd printed and hidden, legal papers I'd photographed before my parents could destroy them. At least $200,000 from my grandmother's estate alone, probably another $150,000 from the college fund and other inheritance money that was supposed to be mine. Plus there's the trust fund my great-aunt left me that they somehow gained control of. Sarah studied the papers carefully, her jaw tightening with each page. They've been systematically stealing from you since you were a child. This isn't family drama, Jessica. This is organized criminal activity. Can we prove it? We're going to do better than prove it, she said, reaching for her phone. We're going to expose them so completely that they'll spend the rest of their lives wishing they'd never met you. She made a series of phone calls over the next hour. First to Detective Rodriguez at the Chicago Police Department, explaining the situation in careful legal terms and arranging for me to file official assault charges that afternoon. Then to someone named Agent Morrison at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, because interstate wire fraud involving that much money was a federal matter. Finally, to Marcus Rivera, the private investigator I'd contacted. Marcus is the best there is, she told me after hanging up from the last call. If there are more skeletons in your family's closet, and trust me, there always are with people like this, he'll find them and document everything. By noon, I was sitting in a sterile police station conference room, filing formal assault charges against my father. The officer taking my statement, Detective Williams, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and graying hair, kept shaking his head as he typed up my report. Ma'am, I have to ask, was this the first time he physically assaulted you? No, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper, but it was the first time he did it in front of 120 witnesses with video evidence. And no one in that room helped you? No one called security or intervened? No one. They just watched. Some of them were entertained by it. He leaned back in his chair, studying my battered face. That's actually going to work strongly in your favor. Public assault with multiple witnesses at a high-profile social event? His lawyer's going to have an extremely difficult time spinning that as anything other than what it was. What happens now? Now we issue a warrant for his arrest. Given the public nature of the assault and the number of witnesses, he'll be in custody by tonight. The thought of my father, the pillar of the community, the respected businessman, the man who'd never faced consequences for anything in his life. Being arrested and fingerprinted sent a surge of satisfaction through me that was almost frightening in its intensity. That afternoon, Sarah and I met with Marcus Rivera at a small cafe near the police station. Marcus was exactly what I'd expected from a private investigator. Mid-40s, graying hair, tired eyes that had seen too much human cruelty. But when he looked at my bruised and swollen face, those tired eyes hardened into something dangerous. Your family thinks they're untouchable, he said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from us. Rich, connected, respected in the community, they probably figure you'll crawl back and apologize like you always have, maybe accept some money to keep quiet about the whole thing. Not this time, I said firmly, surprised by the strength in my own voice. He smiled grimly. Good, because I've already started digging into their background, and what I found in just 18 hours is going to make your assault charges look like a parking ticket. He slid a thick folder across the table. Your father's construction company, Warren and Associates, has been systematically defrauding the city of Milwaukee for over a decade, using undocumented workers and paying them half of minimum wage while billing the city for union labor costs. He's been skimming money off municipal contracts, using substandard materials while charging for premium supplies, and falsifying safety inspections. I stared at the documents, my heart pounding. Financial records, photographs of construction sites, testimony from workers who'd been exploited for years. How did you find all this so fast? Your family has a lot of enemies, Marcus said simply. A lot of people who've been waiting years for someone to take them down, construction workers who've been cheated out of wages, contractors who've been muscled out of jobs, city officials who've suspected what was happening but couldn't prove it. When word got out last night that you were finally fighting back, my phone started ringing off the hook. Sarah leaned forward, studying the documents. This changes everything completely. We're not just talking about assault and family financial abuse anymore. We're talking about federal crimes, tax evasion, wire fraud, labor violations, municipal corruption. There's more, Marcus continued, pulling out another folder. Your sister's new husband? The Hartwell Family Pharmaceutical Company has been systematically overcharging Medicare and Medicaid for diabetes and heart medications. They've been marking up life-saving drugs by over 3,000% and billing government healthcare programs. We're talking about millions of dollars in fraudulent claims. I felt dizzy. The wedding. All those people. All complicit, Marcus said bluntly. Everyone in that room last night knew exactly what kind of people your family really is. They just didn't care because it didn't affect them personally. Rich people protecting rich people, even when those rich people are criminals. How do we use all this information? I asked. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a meaningful look. Very carefully, Sarah said. We build an absolutely airtight case, document everything thoroughly, then we strike all at once with coordinated attacks on multiple fronts. Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, media exposure, regulatory investigations. Everything happens simultaneously, so they can't cover anything up or destroy evidence. How long will that take? 3 weeks, Marcus said. Maybe a month. Can you stay safe and out of sight that long? Because once they realize what we're doing, they're going to try to silence you permanently. I thought about my tiny apartment, my job working with kids who actually valued and appreciated me, my simple life that my family had always mocked and dismissed. Yeah, I can stay hidden. Good, Sarah said, her voice taking on a predatory edge. Because when we're done with them, they're going to wish they'd never heard your name. As I rode the train back home that evening, watching the suburbs blur past in the fading daylight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine hope. Not just hope for justice, but hope for a future where I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next attack, the next humiliation, the next reminder that I was worthless in their eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know what you're doing. Stop now, or it gets much worse for you. This is your only warning. I stared at the message for a long moment, then screenshotted it and forwarded it to both Sarah and Marcus. They thought they could intimidate me. They thought I was still the scared, broken little girl they'd been systematically destroying for 28 years. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. 2.5 weeks later, I was back in Chicago, but this time I wasn't alone. Sarah had assembled what she called her nuclear option team. 6 other lawyers specializing in different areas of law, 3 private investigators, 2 forensic accountants, and a media specialist who looked like she could eat corporate CEOs for breakfast and ask for seconds. Today's the day, Sarah announced as we gathered in the main conference room of her law firm. The room was enormous, with a table that could seat 20 people, and walls covered with case precedents and legal victories. Everyone knows they're part of the operation? Around the table, heads nodded grimly. Marcus had compiled a file that was now over 4 inches thick, detailing my family's various crimes spanning 2 decades. The media specialist, Janet Morrison, a woman with silver hair and shark's eyes, had contacts at every major news outlet in the Midwest and several national publications. The forensic accountants had traced money trails that implicated not just my family, but several of their business associates and political connections. The arrests start at exactly 9 a.m., Sarah continued, consulting her notes. Criminal charges go live simultaneously in 3 different jurisdictions. Civil suits get filed at 10 a.m. in both state and federal court. Media packets containing full documentation go out to journalists at 11 a.m. By noon, they won't be able to hide from what they've done. My phone had been buzzing constantly for the past week with increasingly desperate texts and voicemails from my family. At first, they'd been threatening, telling me I was making a huge mistake, that I'd regret going against the family, that they had connections who could make my life very difficult. Then the messages had turned pleading, asking me to reconsider, offering to work things out, suggesting family therapy or mediation. When those approaches failed, they tried bribery. My mother had called offering to buy me a house if I'd just let this whole unpleasant business blow over. Madison had left a voicemail crying and saying she was sorry, that she'd just been caught up in the excitement of her wedding day and hadn't meant for things to go so far. I'd ignored every single message. At exactly 9 a.m., Detective Rodriguez and 3 other officers arrested my father at his construction company headquarters. The charges read like a criminal law textbook: assault and battery, financial elder abuse, tax evasion, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the government, and employing undocumented workers at below minimum wage. The perp walk footage would be on every local news station by lunchtime. At 9:15 a.m., federal agents raided my brother-in-law's pharmaceutical company based on the evidence Marcus had uncovered about Medicare fraud. The FBI seized computers, financial records, and arrested 3 executives, including Madison's new husband. The charges included conspiracy to defraud government healthcare programs, money laundering, and racketeering. At 9:30 a.m., my mother was served with civil papers at her tennis club, right in the middle of her weekly doubles match. The lawsuit alleged conspiracy to commit fraud, emotional abuse, defamation of character, and knowing participation in the theft of my inheritance. The look on her face when the process server interrupted her backhand was reportedly priceless. At 9:45 a.m., Madison was served with papers at her luxury downtown condo, where she was supposedly on her honeymoon. The charges included knowing participation in financial fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her honeymoon was officially over. I watched it all unfold from Sarah's office, monitoring live news feeds on multiple screens, while legal documents were filed electronically across several jurisdictions. My family's carefully constructed world of wealth, privilege, and respectability was crumbling in real time, and every moment of destruction was being broadcast live. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked as we watched footage of my father being led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face gray with shock. "Free," I said, and for the first time in 28 years, I meant it completely. The media coverage was absolutely brutal, exactly what we'd hoped for. Within hours, local news stations were running special reports about the prominent family's dark criminal empire. The wedding video, which multiple guests had posted on social media before they realized the implications, showed my father punching me while 120 supposedly respectable people watched without intervening. Madison's laughter was clear as a bell, and my mother's cheerful dismissal of the violence was captured in perfect digital clarity. My phone started ringing incessantly. Reporters wanting exclusive interviews, mostly, but also people I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins who'd been told I was mentally unstable and couldn't be trusted. Family friends who'd been fed lies about my character for decades. High school classmates who'd wondered why I'd suddenly become so isolated during senior year. They were all calling to apologize, to say they'd had no idea what was really happening, to offer support. By the end of the first week, the fallout was beyond anything we'd anticipated. My father's construction company had lost every single municipal contract and was facing bankruptcy. 3 city officials had been suspended pending investigation into their connections with Warren and Associates. Madison's marriage had been annulled when her husband's family completely severed all ties to avoid further scandal. My mother had been dropped from the board of every charity organization she'd ever belonged to. But the personal vindication was even sweeter than the legal victories. Former employees of my father's company came forward with years of documented evidence about wage theft and unsafe working conditions. Women who'd worked for family businesses controlled by our social circle revealed decades of sexual harassment that had been covered up. The entire power structure that had protected my family was crumbling as more and more victims found the courage to speak out. "I need to ask you something important," Sarah said during one of our weekly strategy meetings. "Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with the criminal trial? They're going to try to destroy your credibility on the witness stand. They'll bring up every mistake you've ever made, every moment of weakness, every time you've struggled. It's going to be brutal." I thought about the terrified girl who'd walked into that wedding reception just a month ago, desperate for even a scrap of family acceptance and love. Then I looked in the mirror at the woman staring back, still healing physically, but mentally stronger than she'd ever been in her entire life. "Let them try," I said firmly. "I'm not that person anymore. I'm not afraid of them anymore." The trial lasted 8 days and was covered by national media as a story about wealth, privilege, and systematic abuse. My father's legal team tried everything in their considerable arsenal, claimed I was mentally unstable and had fabricated evidence, that I'd attacked him first at the wedding, that the family was actually the victim of a vindictive daughter's elaborate lies and manipulations. But the evidence against them was overwhelming and irrefutable. The wedding video showing the assault, the financial records documenting decades of theft from my inheritance and trust funds, bank statements proving the systematic diversion of money meant for my education and future, witness testimony from dozens of former employees about labor violations and fraud, expert psychological testimony about the long-term impact of systematic emotional and financial abuse. When the jury returned after only 4 hours of deliberation with guilty verdicts on all major charges, I felt something I'd never experienced before in my life. Complete vindication. Not just legal victory, but moral validation that I hadn't been crazy or oversensitive or ungrateful. I had been the victim of systematic abuse, and now everyone knew it. My father was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay back every cent he'd stolen from me, plus punitive damages that totaled over $1 million. The civil suits resulted in additional financial compensation that ensured I'd never have to worry about money again. But more importantly, the public exposure meant that my family's reputation was destroyed beyond any possibility of repair. The money wasn't even the best part of winning, though. The best part was the letter I received from my cousin Emma, whom I hadn't spoken to in over 10 years, because my parents had told her I'd said terrible things about her children and couldn't be trusted around them. "I am so incredibly sorry I believed their lies about you," she wrote in a 5-page handwritten letter. "I should have known you would never say cruel things about innocent children. I should have known you were the one telling the truth all along. Can you ever forgive me for abandoning you when you needed family support the most?" Letters and messages like that arrived every single week for months. Extended family members, childhood friends, former classmates, teachers who remembered me fondly, all reaching out to rebuild relationships that my parents had systematically destroyed through decades of lies and manipulation. 6 months after the trial ended, I was standing in the bright, welcoming lobby of my new therapy center. A beautiful space designed specifically to help children and teenagers who'd experienced family trauma process their experiences through art and creative expression. The walls were covered with colorful artwork created by the kids I worked with, and every piece told a story of healing and hope. On the main wall was a framed photo from the grand opening ceremony, showing me surrounded by all the people who truly mattered in my life. Sarah and her legal team, Marcus and his investigators, the social workers and teachers I collaborated with, and most importantly, dozens of the children I'd helped over the years who saw me for exactly who I really was, someone who understood their pain and was dedicated to helping them heal. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Saw the newspaper article about your center's first anniversary. So proud of everything you've built. I smiled and typed back, thank you for giving me the chance to build it. For everything. As I locked up that evening and walked to my car, the reliable Honda I'd bought with my settlement money because I preferred practical to flashy, I thought about the person I'd been before that wedding. Always apologizing for existing, always trying desperately to earn love that would never come, always believing that I was fundamentally flawed and unworthy. That broken, desperate person was gone forever. In her place was someone who knew her own worth, who surrounded herself with people who genuinely cared about her well-being, who used her painful past as a source of strength to help others heal from similar trauma. Someone who had learned that family isn't about blood relations or shared DNA. It's about people who show up for you, support your dreams, and treat you with basic human respect. My biological family had tried to destroy me completely. Instead, they'd accidentally set me free to become the person I was always meant to be. And as I drove home to my own house, a modest but comfortable place I'd bought with their stolen money, now legally returned to me with interest, I whispered the words that had carried me through the darkest moments of this journey. They wanted me silent and broken. They should have just left me alone. Some families are worth fighting for, worth preserving, worth making sacrifices to maintain. Others are toxic systems that need to be completely dismantled for everyone's safety and well-being. Mine was definitely the latter, and I had no regrets about bringing their entire corrupt world crashing down around them. The end. If this story resonated with you, please share your own experiences in the comments. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is let others know they're not alone in their struggles with family trauma. Healing is possible, justice is achievable, and you deserve so much better than people who treat you badly.